Welcome to a special release of the Reality Escape Pod's Spoilers Club. This episode features Haley and Cameron Cooper of Strange Bird Immersive in Houston, Texas, the makers of the magnificent escape room The Man from Beyond. And while we have a Spoilers Club about their game, they also happen to be two of the biggest fans of Sleep No More. They are students of Sleep No More and Punchdrunk, and so we asked them to join us and spoil and explore this iconic immersive theatrical production.
And if you aren't familiar with our Spoilers Club series, this is a Patreon exclusive series where we typically talk about iconic escape rooms. We invite the creators on usually. They give us walkthroughs and really cool behind the scenes stories, and we can discuss design choices in their full spoilery details.
In this case, we didn't have the creators. We just brought on two learned superfans, and they gave us so much insight and so much detail that even having gone a couple times, I had no idea.
I'd like to note that this episode has a content advisory. It will contain some mature and slightly graphic content due to the nature of the theatrical scenes that we will be describing. This includes scenes with sexual overtones, as well as scenes of violence. Please be advised.
This is part 1 of 2. I hope that you enjoy the show. Welcome to the Reality Escape Pod Spoilers Club. Today, PG and I are joined by guests Haley and Cameron Cooper from Strange Bird Immersive in Houston, Texas. But we will not be discussing their game, The Man from Beyond, because we already have a wonderful 2-part episode with them. Instead, we will be talking about Sleep No More. The epic New York City immersive theater experience that has run for 14, 15 years. It may be closing. It may not. They're in a little bit of a will they, won't they on potentially eternal 1-month extensions. But we're going to be spoiling it for you today. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thank you for having us. We consider this something of a sacred trust.
I am very aware that you are big fans of Punchdrunk and Sleep No More specifically.
Thank you so much for coming on. Haley and Cameron have prepared an 8-page document outline for this. So I just want everybody to know I really appreciate your commitment to being organized, and we're going to get into the weeds in this, and it's only appropriate because Sleep No More is probably the most off-cited experience in the podcast for creators. This was a huge inspiration for why they wanted to get into immersive in the first place.
It really is the seminal work in the genre, especially in the United States.
And what I want to say up front is that we're going to be exploring this together. Haley and Cameron have gone a lot.
I have been 11 times, plus 2 parties. Halloween 2015 and New Year's Eve 2014.
I've been 9 times.
All right. I have been twice. PG has been once. I think that there's definitely a range of feelings about Sleep No More on this show. PG, how do you feel about Sleep No More?
David, why would you put me on the spot early on? Okay, I'll say this much is that I think that I had a lot of expectations going in. Of course, it was hyped so much by everybody before I went in. October 2023. Is when I went. And I think at that point in the run, my biggest issue was the crowding.
Which has not gotten better since they announced that it was closing.
Yeah, so I don't feel like I got to see anything. All I saw was the backs of people. And to me, it felt like this death race of trying to get in front of the person in front of you. I'm aggressive, right? I can be aggressive. So I would get in front of the crowd and I'm, trying to leave a respectful distance between me and the performer. Somebody comes in front of me. Now I'm in front of them. And now we're literally breathing down their necks. I think for me personally, it just was so overpowering. in that it took away my enjoyment. Like, I just could not enjoy it because of that crowding. I was getting really frustrated. I couldn't see anything. Just for me, it wasn't fun. And then since then, there have been a lot of really great immersive experiences to come out after that. Maybe none on this crazy scale, but even something like Delusion, there's 10 people in a walkthrough. I got to see everything. I was front and center, and I almost enjoyed that more, just literally because I could see it. That was my only issue. I'm sure it's great. I'm really excited to hear about this from your perspective because you've seen everything. And it's almost like I would rather be able to relive it this way than in person when I can't see it.
That story breaks my heart. I've heard that story before. I'm not surprised by that story. We did notice at some point in our journey, like we went first in 2013, that crowds started just being bigger, to the point that we actually asked ourselves at some point, did they increase their maximum capacity? We don't think so. We think it's always been 450 people a night maximum, but perhaps they've been like selling well more over the years, getting out to tourists and that sort of thing, especially given the fact that it's not really spoken language play. It's very, very accessible theater in New York City. But at the same time, I'm sorry that happened to you. Like, it just ruins the show. But there are still like ways that you can see the show and still be alone. Even on our closing shows that we went to this last January, I had a number of cycles where I was still alone with the performer. It's something you have to find your way around the crowds. And then also, like, you have to be the kind of person who enjoys being a little bit aggressive. I think it does reward that.
I say, have you met PG?
I can do it, but the thing is, it got old after 3+ hours of me having to elbow my way to the front past all these people. I know you just went very recently, so maybe even though it's crowded, you know where to go to find those quiet moments or the moments where you know it's not going to be crowded. And for me, I had to be in the meat of it because David had already given me some pointers, like, you have to be here if you want to not miss this major plot point. Try to make it here at this. So I'm really trying to catch the major beats. Whereas if it was my third time going, sure, I've seen it. Now I can go spend a little time doing some more quieter things. You know, I had one good moment, which was I stumbled into it. Again, this was a small, quiet part. There was only 5 other people in the room. Great. And then all of these people come in. It's a fight scene, but then they didn't let anybody else in the room. For me, this was the best. Like, they stopped everybody from coming in. I was already in there by accident. So I got to be one of 10 people that watched it. And that was the best moment for me. So if I had a series of those types of encounters, I think I would have enjoyed it a lot more.
Was this the interrogation dance?
This was in the bar. This was like the fighting death scene in the bar, I think.
Banquet murder. Great.
Yeah, at its best, that's what Sleep No More is. And if you end up following the main character, his following is very crowded.
Before we move into all of the stuff, I want to say that my experiences landed somewhere in between PG's and Haley and Cameron's. I have some love for this experience. I have some contempt for this experience. I think that this experience is sort of an interesting magical confluence of things. It was the right onboarding story for old theater people to get into immersive theater. I think Macbeth is a really accessible entry point, at least for theater people. It's probably not a broadly accessible on-ramp, but certainly for the theater inclined, it is in New York. I think one of the magical things about this for New York City specifically is that there is no real spoken language in it, except for some one-on-ones. And so you can be from anywhere in the world. You can have any or no grasp of English, and this experience will land more or less the same for you. I mean, there's, of course, positioning and cultural knowledge that might be helpful, but anyone can do this. You're not going to go to Hamilton and not understand English and walk out appreciating Hamilton. And I think that is one of the reasons that this had the staying power that it did. And so with that setup, we're going to go through a lot of different aspects of this show today. And we're going to let Haley and Cameron drive because they are very much the experts on this, and they have done a lot of homework, as PG noted.
Yeah, we do want to state officially that we are not in any way associated with Punchdrunk. I wouldn't even necessarily categorize us as like the superest fans. We haven't been 100 times. We don't have a blog about it.
I've met somebody who had gone many dozens of times, had a journal of every single experience that you could possibly had every single one-on-one, knew everything there was to know about this. There are more super fans out there, but these are our super fans. I will also just say, if you're planning on listening with your family to this, just be mindful that there is sexual content in Sleep No More. We'll be discussing things about nudity. There are sex scenes. They're not like pornographic, but they are sex scenes. There is blood. There is murder. I just want to be very clear about that this is some stuff that we're going to be talking about.
To a certain extent, our credentials is not just in the number of times that we've been, so much as like our passion. If you've ever seen The Man from Beyond or ever met us at a conference or listened on the podcast, we are here because of this show. This show changed everything for us. And that story is not an isolated event. There's a number of creators that can point to Sleep No More and say, this is why I got into the immersive industry. It captured something so fundamental in my soul that I had to change my life. And that's Cameron and me. So those are our credentials. We have done a little bit of research. They actually have a book out for those who might be super fans called the Punchdrunk Encyclopedia. I don't know if anybody's heard of this. In classic Punchdrunk style, they wrote a book, but did not make it easy for you to read. It's just a company that is not interested in holding your hand and doing things in a straightforward fashion.
It is like an encyclopedia. It is organized in entries from A to Z, from Aardvark to Zeus, with essays scattered amongst it. And they intend for you to take whatever path through the book you want. It's a very Punchdrunk sort of book.
Yeah, Cameron's jumping around through it. I have actually sat down and read it Aardvark to Zeus. So occasionally we might have a few quotes from the creators themselves, but I encourage anybody who is really interested in Punchdrunk's practice from a creative point of view, not from a fan point of view, but from a creator, absolutely read this book. It is as useful as the theme park design book for theme park people.
Yeah, and even if your practice is not doing the same thing as Punchdrunk, you will learn something from it because they've thought about it.
Literally no one's practice is doing the exact same thing as Punchdrunk, and I'm not even sure if that's true about Punchdrunk anymore.
Yeah, well, first we want to give a little bit of background as to who this company is and where they're coming from. Because if you just go to Sleep No More, it's almost like Cameron says, it's like it popped from the head of Zeus, fully formed, like Athena. It's almost out of nowhere.
Like nothing like this had been seen in the United States before. It was like, Mozart showing up in the Stone Age. But back home, they had actually had a decade or so of prior work that was building towards what we know as Sleep No More.
So just reflecting on the company name, Punchdrunk, which I think is so extraordinarily apt because it's about an emotional effect. This is a company that their primary goal is in getting an emotional hit, a pinpointed emotional hit out of their audience. Lots of different artists have different focuses. Sometimes it's about making money. Sometimes it's about making the audience feel something. Sometimes it's about telling a good story. Sometimes it's about serving their artists. For Punchdrunk, it is about a feeling. They're not interested in creating shows that make you think. They're interested in creating shows that make you feel something. And that is very much, I think, emphasized in their name.
Yeah, fundamentally, they're an experimental theater company. It's a very avant-garde thing. And the fact that they've landed with a major commercial production in New York is really quite unusual and special.
I think for them, it is about audience experience. They are not going to be investing in the narrative, in the aha.
Yeah, that's also clear.
Yes.
And that's what a lot of people expect and want, but that's not what they're intending to provide.
Going a little bit more into some history here, it was founded in 1999 by Felix Barrett at Exeter University. It was always about found space installations. I don't know of anything that Punchdrunk has done that is proscenium style. Finding the building is the primary thing. They find the building, and then from there they create the work that belongs in that building. They hit upon the dance angle for things after actually witnessing the failure of words. There was a production that they did in the kind of open building sandbox style of Shakespeare's The Tempest. They were using Shakespeare's words for it, and Felix kind of called it anticlimactic. The words were kind of alienating and very heady. People didn't know what was going on. It didn't fill the space. So he started a partnership with a dance company, started working with Maxine Doyle, who is the choreographer and co-director of Sleep No More. And their first collaboration was actually of Sleep No More in 2003, when it was first produced in London. They also produced some other mask shows in the UK. Like, a mask show is a very specific format that we will get into. That's the Firebird Ball, production of Faust, and Mask of the Red Death. You'll probably notice that all of these, the Firebird Ball is actually based on Romeo and Juliet. So all of them have source material, like Sleep No More does at its core, but they're like relensing it through a different perspective. But they didn't just do masked shows. They also did a number of other kinds of experimental stuff, and that's certainly what they're interested in doing in the future as well.
There's a very early show in here that was played for an audience of 4. And we think that this is a pretty good sort of capsule summary of what Punchdrunk really wants to do. So I was going to read an entry. This is The Moon Slave from 2000. This was, as I said, an audience of 4 one-on-ones was what this production played to. Instructed, you come to an old village hall alone. You enter and see that it appears to be set up for a conventional performance. Classic proscenium arch, programs on every seat, a naturalistic drawing room set on the stage. You notice a package on the table center stage. It rings, keeps ringing. You step up onto the stage and open it. Inside is a mobile phone. You answer and are instructed to go outside and get in an awaiting car. The silent, masked, gloved chauffeur, head to toe in white, provides an alarm to hit if you want the performance to stop at any point. Safely positioned in the back seat, he drives you to the crepuscular countryside. A sound system begins via the car stereo system, Igor Stravinsky's Firebird Suite, overlaid with a prologue narrating the tale of Princess Viola, who from birth was forbidden to dance. The car turns onto a dirt track, pulls up at a ruined mansion, one lit window at its very top. Your chauffeur opens your door, puts your headset on, returns to the car, and speeds off. Alone again. The soundtrack continues, intimately, just for you via the headphones. Tonight, Viola has fled the palace and is following a path into the forest. A burning torch lights your path. As Viola reaches a gate in the story, so do you, and you realize you are Viola. The moon beckons you to dance in its light in a clearing. You're missing your betrothal party to do so. You turn a corner and see a banqueting table laid out for 20 people, coffee steaming, cigarettes smoldering. You journey on through installations that layer and illustrate the narrative playing out through your headset. The night before the wedding day, dusk falls. Viola has burst from the palace, cutting her feet in her haste to reach the clearing. You see a flash of white petticoat far ahead. She calls to the moon, hears its music playing more powerfully than ever before. But it is the night of the lunar eclipse, and you feel the music surge. The eclipse occurs, and she was no longer dancing alone. Alone for 30 minutes, firelight ensuring you cannot see beyond your immediate vicinity. At that point, the italicized sentence, the music swells. A marine flare shoots into the sky, turning everything for 15 miles bright red, and revealing 200 scarecrows, the biggest reveal achievable on 200 pounds, to suggest that those that have danced with the devil before. At this point, a second flare fills the sky and reveals a figure, your chauffeur, walking towards you through the scarecrows. He takes your hand, leads you back along the path, removes your headset, and returns you to the back seat of the car. As he drives away, over the car stereo, the epilogue plays. Viola's fiancé, Hugo, found the blood trail leading to the clearing, discovered her footprints in the sand alongside another set with a cloven hoof. At this crescendo, driving through nocturnal country lanes, Joel Scott is lurking in the shadows as Hugo, waiting for you. If you happen to glance from your window, you would see the flash of his face looking intently at you, a chilling coda as you return to where it all began. Says Felix Barrett. Out of the 4 audience members, 2 of them were sitting on the wrong side of the car. He was out there for hours for a total of 12 seconds of performance. It's all about the moment, the punctuation. And that's Moon Slave, which some call the ultimate Punchdrunk experience.
That's wild.
Yeah, I had not heard of that one.
Internally, they hold that up as their best production that they ever put on. But I think it speaks to a number of their different elements, leaving the audience to discover things on their own, being alone.
Taking you out of your element, leaving you adrift.
Giving you a story, but not really making it very clear what's fully happening. Sleep No More, New York doesn't do it, but pyrotechnics, they were really into pyrotechnics. A big finale reveal. And just like the commitment of one person waiting 4 hours for 12 seconds and only 2 people actually seeing it. But they don't care. It's not about mass commercialism. It is about the singular hit for the one person.
The person who happened to be sitting on the right side of the car, because of course they are not guided to do any particular thing. But anyway, Sleep No More was originally in London in 2003. It was the first Punchdrunk show with dance. It was remounted in Boston in 2009, so 6 years later, as part of a regional theater festival. This was set in a schoolhouse in Boston, and it was a bit wilder than the current Sleep No More. There was one of the bathtubs had a live eel in it, just because they thought that would be creepy. The eel's name was Norman.
Okay.
I wish I'd seen that version.
There was apparently also a bird and a number of other interesting things that happened in Boston.
The finale was much more wild and violent. So there's a certain sense, I believe, that like the New York production, by going bigger, sanitized it a little bit, made it safer, which is totally understandable. And then, of course, Immersive, with an E, is the producer who saw the Boston production, saw its success, and saw the potential to bring it to New York City when it opened in 2011. While Punchdrunk is still very much checking in on that show, and it is Punchdrunk's show, Immersive essentially runs the operations.
The Punchdrunk International themselves did open a copy of Sleep No More in Shanghai in 2017, which looks very much like it, but they've added a few things and made a few cultural adjustments for the different audience.
Yeah, my understanding is that a lot of the more sexual content has been removed, and they have added in some patriotic content.
So Sleep No More has a number of different things in there. Obviously, it's a telling of Shakespeare's Macbeth, kind of through the lens of the Hitchcock film noir. But it also has elements of other works in it. Rebecca, which is the Daphne du Maurier novel, and also the Hitchcock movie. And they also mix in the story of the Paisley witch trials, which was the last witch trial in Scotland and one of the last major ones in Europe. And I believe in Shanghai, they've added, I forget the name of it, but there's a Chinese cultural element that they layered in there as a tertiary effect.
I think one of the things that I think, even if it wasn't a direct influence, it can't be understated how important the 1999 film Eyes Wide Shut was in making the vibe of Sleep No More, and I think the masked shows in general. When this initially was being produced, that would have been much more in the zeitgeist. I think it still is to a lesser extent, but that is something that doesn't get cited, but I think has to be in the conversation.
I don't know of any direct connections of influence there, but I think you might be right. I don't remember exactly when the masks showed up. I think it was around like 2001.
And that would have been right in the mix of, there would not have been a single person in 2001 who was even remotely culturally aware, who was putting on masks in a group of people and watching, especially the sex scenes and stuff like that, and not thought about Eyes Wide Shut.
Yeah. It's also set in 1939. Which I think is interesting because we all know that nothing bad at all happened that year. They pull music from lots of Bernard Herrmann scores, Vertigo and Psycho. A lot of ink spots, so they use a lot of music from that time period and dress things accordingly, while still occasionally having things that are minor juxtapositions, such as the rave music in there as well. We always like to talk to people, honestly. When I know that somebody is going to Sleep No More, I have a document that I send them. Because it's kind of a pay it forward thing. When I was going for my first time, my good friend Brad Winkler told me, this is what it is, this is what you need to expect, this is what you should do in advance to make the most of it. Because making the show happen is kind of in your court, right? So I always like to ask, are you the kind of person who wants to experience a dream? Do you want to just go in, have impressions, see moments, and just kind of go with the flow of the whole thing, and it doesn't necessarily make sense, but it is like visually an experience and stunning? Or are you the type of person who wants to play detective, where you leave a scene, like you were saying, PG, and you're just like, I don't know what happened there, and that bothers me, but I wish I did know what was happening there. And like most of this audience here is probably a little bit more of escape room people. We're a little bit more inclined to be detectives, in which case I always tell you, if that's your inclination, if that's the sort of thing that you want, where like you see a scene and you make the connection, you can name your characters, study your source material. You gotta do a bit of homework. Coming from the UK, I think Macbeth is way better known than it is in the United States. It's just because it's a very different culture around Shakespeare over there. People actually go to the theater for one, like in the United States.
But I mean, I know Macbeth. I studied a lot of Shakespeare, and there were still scenes, and I'm talking about more the small scenes. Like, I know the main story beats, but it's like the scene with the maid, the side stories. That's
right.
What I actually kind of wanted to explore. They were the more accessible scenes because they weren't as crowded, and those were difficult. But I would say I wish I had gone in with the mindset of just float around like it's a dream. Don't expect it to make sense. And I would have had a much better time, I think, because it's impossible to see everything on one trip. I wish I'd just been like, why even bother? Just go and explore and just enjoy it for what it is and not try to have it be cohesive.
Yeah, the framing here, I think, actually does make an impact. Knowing that they're going against traditional authoritarian didactic narrative where you will learn a lesson at the end and the story will be handed to you. That's not at all what they are doing. It's so much more about impressions.
I'm not sure. I mean, I think that statement is carrying with it sort of an implicit cultural understanding that everybody in the room understands Macbeth well enough that you don't have to go and think about it, and you can just go in and absorb whatever it is you absorb and walk away with that being enough. I'm not sure that translates as well culturally as it would have in the UK in 2000 something.
Well, as PG found, once you get off sort of the main track, you do encounter stuff that is unique to Sleep No More, the show. Honestly, ferreting out what's going on, even if there is something that you can ferret out as going on, because sometimes there are just intentionally mysterious happenings going on, becomes a challenging thing. I think that's intentional on the part of the creators. Whether or not you appreciate it is a different question, but that's what they do.
I don't think they want their mysteries to be fully solved, honestly. And there was, in our research prepping for this, just making sure we really understood all of the characters. Not that we're going to spoil all of the characters, but I was just like, what is the taxidermist about again? And I follow the taxidermist for 2 full cycles on different trips, and I'm still not really certain about that one.
I didn't even know there was a taxidermist.
Oh, if you want to find the taxidermist, you can never find him. And when you're not looking for the taxidermist, there he is. It's just one of these characters.
Yeah, so Felix Barrett says, quote, "The purpose is not to try and find the performers. That is not the gauge in how far you've succeeded in having a great night. The purpose of any project is that you're listening to your gut and being led by your instinct, and whatever piques your interest, drives your curiosity, that's what you follow. That's going to be different things for different people." They're trying to make something for everyone as long as you follow your instinct. And I know that doesn't always work, but that is their goal. Punchdrunk will actually tell you in the book that no element of the production pulls rank on the other. They are just as interested in the lighting and the sound as they are in the performance.
And the set.
And the set, of course.
And the objects throughout the space as well. All of these things are supposed to work together as a whole. No one of them should be pulling rank on the other. Although if push comes to shove, it is lighting that pulls rank. Just yesterday, we were installing something in our upcoming next escape room. It's looking great, it's looking great, it's looking great. The whole set's coming together. And then you turn on the light, and then you have a moment. You have a show. Lighting is everything. And they use it extraordinarily well.
This special release episode is supported by Morty, Buzzshot, Cogs by Clockwork Dog, and Patreon supporters like you. We're taking a moment to thank our upcoming sponsors for Season 8, Morty, Buzzshot, and Cogs by Clockwork Dog.
We thank them for their ongoing support, and we are so excited for all of the things we're going to bring you in the fall with Season 8. Thanks again to our sponsors.
I used to wish every day for an app that does exactly what Morty does. It lets me track all of the escape rooms I've played, and I also use it to find games around me, including game reviews and open time slots. You can even find discount codes. And the best part, it's all free. It's got a great website experience, and it's also available on both iPhone and Android, so you'll never be without your Morty app.
I believe in Morty so much that I have a stake in it as an advisor, and I always enjoy the time that I get to spend giving the Morty team my input and suggestions. Start discovering and tracking your immersive outings today. You can learn more at morty.app/repod. That's REPOD to sign up and get a special badge for our listeners. We'd also like to thank longtime sponsor Buzzshot. Buzzshot is escape room software powering business growth, player marketing, and improving the customer experience. They offer an assortment of pre- and post-game features, including robust waiver management, branded team photos, and streamlined review management.
Streamline your marketing and grow your escape room business. Repod listeners get an extended free trial and 20% off your first 3 months with no setup fees or hidden charges. Visit buzzshot.com/repod. That's REPOD to learn more. We'd also like to thank sponsor Cogs. Are you looking to up your game when it comes to creating a more theatrical experience for your escape room or immersive show? Cogs by Clockwork Dog is a software-hardware platform that makes it easy to create a show with lighting and sound cues, whether you're totally new to escape room tech or a seasoned engineer.
Get the Cogs starter set for only $130 plus free shipping to the USA. This bundle is usually valued at $257. You can learn more and purchase your starter set at cogs.show. Use code REPOD at checkout. That's REPOD. And thank you so much to Cogs by Clockwork Dog for their support.
Heartfelt thanks to sponsors Morty, Buzzshot, and Cogs by Clockwork Dog. Our sponsors are making Season 8 possible. You can find links and details in the show notes. Supporting our sponsors supports this podcast. I feel like we've been talking in very kind of couched, abstract terms about what Sleep No More is. Let's get just into some concrete details. Let's just talk about exactly how the show works and runs for someone who's never been.
Yeah, so Sleep No More is what we call a sandbox. It's a world that you can play in however you want. Physically, it's a large building, very large. Like, it's one of the biggest in-person entertainment buildings out there. It's bigger than most of the Meow Wolves.
It's bigger than Convergence Station. I don't know of a single immersive installation that is bigger than Sleep No More.
It's 100,000 square feet. It's over 5 floors in a building in the meatpacking district in Chelsea. There's 22 actors involved, up to 450 guests, hopefully fewer, but, probably not anytime soon. And you are, as an audience member, let loose in this. The actors are doing what they do. They're on a programmed path, and you get to walk around, look at the sets, follow them, do whatever you want to experience the show. There are also some other staff in the building. These are the stewards. They wear black masks where you wear white. They act as security and as helpers if the audience needs anything or the actors need anything during the show. And they'll occasionally guide the path of the audience.
I have a good friend of mine who once saw an audience member steal Macbeth's pants because he was having the blood washed off of him. So like the pants were just like laying off to the side. An audience member was like, ho, 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 what I'm going to do in my show, my instinct is to take these pants away from the performer. So a black mask is the person who is there who delivers Macbeth his pants, the bonus pants that they had on the sideline. So they're acting as security, they're acting as logistics. I think it's extraordinarily wise in any kind of sandbox situation to have staff on site in room security, especially for any scenes that are involving nudity, big crowd scenes, or anything like that, where people might be a little bit more inspired to get bold.
And they also have some fairly energetic dance numbers, and they will often have the stewards define the area and keep people out of the way.
I will say that one of the things that really bothered me in my latest visit to Sleep No More, and one of the things that like really soured me, were we had a couple of people in our show, more than a couple, who were really asserting themselves on the show. For one example, when the bathtub scene in the hospital, I believe, where Lady Macbeth takes a bath and then emerges, and then the first time I went, gestured at somebody and asked them to pick up her robe and put it over her shoulders, which in my first show, that was actually me. That was the first thing I did, basically, upon entering this, which was like nothing I had ever experienced in a show before. When we went the second time, there was a person who went out of her way to go and pick up that robe in advance and then put it over Lady Macbeth's shoulders without being prompted, and was also performing alongside her, acting as if she was her friend. And I can't think of a time I've ever wanted to throw a guest out of an experience quite like that. And that was just one example of many where there were audience members who were just very much asserting themselves on the show.
Well, that's certainly in bad taste, not at all in the spirit of the show. But I've never seen a steward interfere with the audience's actions as part of the show, unless they're breaking one of the few rules. Maybe they should.
We can discuss that more later,
Yeah.
but that's definitely a thing that it certainly affected me as a participant.
One of the things I don't think we mentioned that I didn't even know before I went in is that the story is on a cycle. It's on a loop. So it repeats itself 3 times, 2.5 times.
So technically, if you get first entry to Sleep No More, it starts like 5 minutes before the ballroom sequence, and which is not technically the beginning of the story, but that's where they start it. And it ends right after the final banquet, which again is like not officially the ending. So even though it looks like it's 3 times, it's technically like 2.5 or something like that. So if you go and you're doing the follow the actor thing, you can get 2.5 full stories essentially in one particular visit. But that has the wonderful advantage of being able to piece together different points of view so that you can see Macbeth's story, but then what the heck is going on with this maid over here? What is going on in the hotel lobby? So it just kind of encourages you to spread out, see more sets, experience more of what is happening in a single ticket. Whereas I think if they just did one story over the course of 2 hours, you would be completely lost.
As someone who isn't a completionist, I really enjoy this aspect of it. I think that it's cool that you make your choices and, you know, you see different characters in your first loop and you're like, oh, I'm really curious about what he's doing, or she's real unusual, I'm going to go and follow her. You have to react on your emotional impulses to decide what you're going to do next. And I think that's something that's really successful. I think it's something that people who have a completionist bent really struggle with. But that is definitely not me, and I really love it.
I have a completionist bent, and I like that it looped 2 to 3 times because I feel less like I'm missing out on something. Oh, I'll have an opportunity to catch Lady Macbeth's scene. If I didn't see it this time, I'll try to catch it again in the next loop. So even as a completionist, I found that aspect very satisfying.
I always tell people, don't drink, don't do drugs in advance, because Sleep No More is actually a constant decision machine. Some people go in and they say, okay, well, I'm gonna follow so-and-so. They go in with an agenda. Other people go in and say, I'm going to see what I see and what performers inspire me. Those are the people I'm going to follow. But no matter what kind of planning you do, you're still going to go in and need to make decisions. Like every 2 minutes, you have to decide, am I staying here or am I going? And then where do I go next? East stairs, west stairs, where are we going? And I think that mode is really fun. It's a choice mechanic without impacting the story.
It is, but every choice I followed led to, the dead end, and then you'd have to go back to where you put your finger in the book and just start over from a new adventure.
It is very easy to dead end yourself. And that, I think, is something that makes this a highly variable experience for a lot of different people. You can chance your way into a wonderful night, and you can chance your way into nothing but confusion and loneliness.
It's such a big space. Like sometimes you can spend a scene 5 minutes looking for something that's going on.
The thing that I always remind escape room players before going in is this isn't an escape room. The set is magnificent and you should take it in. But if you are searching the set for a mystery, if you are searching the set for a mission, you are searching in the wrong places. If you don't tell an avid escape room person this, they will find themselves in a candy shop, opening up every drawer and finding interesting objects that mean nothing and be very confused. And that has more to do with the learned habits of escape room players than anything. But the experience certainly doesn't do anything to stop you or dissuade you.
I would not say that exploring the sets does not have meaning, but I would say it's not the beginning of a quest. It's not the beginning of a puzzle chain. Like, it's not encouraging you to go here and then there.
I would be shocked if there are very many people who derive meaning from exploring the set. I think that you can derive a lot of enjoyment from looking at the things that people made and from taking in some of the choices that were made in the set design, but there is no end game for you. There's no game there.
No, there's no game. The set will sometimes tell you a little bit about itself or about the characters that inhabit it, but that's as far as it's going to go. Now, the really interesting thing that always surprises people when we tell them about Sleep No More is the way that the story is told, the way it's performed, in that it's almost purely a dance and movement piece. There is, in the main progression of the show, little to no words spoken, and most of the words that are spoken are gibberish. And it's all set-piece dance numbers or what they call durational activities, movement-based things, performance art sort of things.
A durational activity is specifically something that's extraordinarily boring. So you'll have these giant set dance pieces with multiple characters quite often, and then that character will go slink off to a private space and start cutting out words from a Bible.
Oh, yeah. I saw a lot of those. I think I consistently made the wrong choice in every decision branching.
Every character has a lot of durational activities mixed in with their dance scenes.
I kept waiting, and I'm like, okay, this guy's arranging his tools on his desk. Something cool's going to happen. Is it any moment now?
Which is actually what Punchdrunk says is why they have durational activities. It's because it actually really increases the tension. It winds you up. It tells you something big is about to happen. And maybe if you had followed that person out of that room, PG, you would have seen something incredible in the next 5 minutes, but maybe you didn't make it through the crowd or who knows what.
Or maybe nothing happened. It doesn't always.
Or maybe, yeah, durational activities actually have a really nice function. I find that you can count to 15 once a character starts doing a durational activity, and all of a sudden the crowd is gone. People don't have patience for it. So I think it's actually really useful as a crowd dispersing mechanism. It also, I think, is really useful for the actors. The performers get a moment to catch their breath with durational activities. It is a 3-hour long show, even though they only do 2.5 cycles. It's a lot to ask of them, and they get very sweaty. The banquet scene is actually, to me, it's a big set piece. Probably if you're listening to this podcast, you've seen the banquet at least once. It's kind of insanely boring. I think it's very long. I kind of count it as a durational activity, but it is a moment for everybody to catch their breath.
That's true. It was great the first time, and then the second time, and I'm like, this is going on a bit long, guys. Let's wrap it up.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the things that I did appreciate about how much it takes out of the performers, I loved seeing the different ways that they worked into the script drinking. The amount of water that these performers need to consume to not dehydrate is non-trivial. And they worked all of these moments in of celebratory drinking or depressive drinking. There was a lot of it, And it was one of the most organic things. It's something that I would never have noticed on my first loop through. And it was probably the single biggest thing for me in terms of what I appreciated in my second time going, which I think slowly started to become more about observing the machinery and learning what I could from that. I loved the way they executed that.
They also work in moments of washing and changing clothes. Like all the athletic characters at some point have a reason to change their shirt so that they have at least a fresh shirt at the beginning of the cycle. So I think we've talked about Sleep No More. I think it's time that we actually take you there. I think we should start from the beginning and take people into a visit of Sleep No More.
I'm ready. I'm ready to actually experience Sleep No More for the first time, even though I actually went. I am very excited to hear about all the different stories. Let's dive in.
So they call the building the McKittrick Hotel. You might find some like weird articles out there that there's, oh yes, it was like this 1939 hotel that just got shuttered at the last minute, and it was supposed to be this like gleaming jewel of the New York City hotel scene, and this is all crap. It's part of the mythos.
Yeah, this was a warehouse type building in a neighborhood that had nothing really going on but kind of semi-industrial type stuff. When Sleep No More opened, this neighborhood was one that no one really visited. By the time it is now closing in 2024, this is one of the more expensive neighborhoods in the New York City boroughs.
You're telling me that this was not an actual hotel?
Nope.
Illusions are shattered.
It was probably it was maybe one of those sort of turn of the century Manhattan factories. And then it was probably nothing for a long time. And its previous incarnation was a nightclub, which I think is how they were able to occupy it, because it had already been permitted as an assembly space because it was a nightclub.
That makes sense.
So they sell tickets for multiple different entry times, which is important because they can't let 450 people into the building all at once. There needs to be an onboarding sequence, right? So they space people out by 15 minutes in different groups. Once you are inside, it is dark, so dark, and music is already playing. You are forced to do a coat check. No coats, no purses, no bags of any kind, and no cell phones. You do have to pouch up your cell phone, which, thank you. I appreciate that, actually, because I don't need people taking pictures of the actors or otherwise being distracted. It's literally a hazard in this show.
So to save yourself some time, check your phone. Don't put it in their stupid bag.
Yeah, just put it in your coat.
After coat check, there's a hotel check-in desk. And you go up there and you present your ticket. And they give you a playing card from ace all the way up to king. And the lower your card, the sooner you get in.
Then you're told to make your way upstairs. Once you go up this grand staircase, you enter a very dark maze.
And by dark, we mean very dark. It's lit only by tiny LED candles in the corners.
Actually, I think they only turn on the candles at the end.
Maybe.
Oh, yeah.
I remember it being very dark because I literally couldn't see, and David had to go in front of me, and he started bragging about his spectacular night vision. So I remember that it was very dark.
True.
Yeah, I've always thought it was such a really nice customer service thing that like this maze is dark and disorienting, and it is designed to slow you down. They don't want you entering hot off the street straight into their world. They want you to take time kind of entering it. But when you exit, they do light up little candles in the corners so that you can fully see the maze, so that your offboarding is actually really nice and gentle. You're not going through that same disorientation.
Yeah, but at the beginning, you're feeling your way through this maze.
Yeah, it is literally by touch. The walls are felt, I think. And they actually call this whole experience a crossfade. Punchdrunk is almost more inspired by film than they are by theater. They talk a lot about the long shot, which is like the big dance sequences, the close-up, which is the durational activities where they're doing something interesting on a typewriter or whatnot. And then there's this crossfade, which is like a different way of thinking about the magic circle than I am used to. Like for me, the magic circle has always been a very hard line where it's like you're in this imaginary world or you're not. Like you're in the real world where like I'm concerned about is my parking meter running out, and then I'm in an Amazonian jungle and needing to find an artifact. Punchdrunk is not thinking in those terms of like, when does that magic circle begin? It's not hard line. It is a gentle, like you're in this hotel lobby, but you're checking into Sleep No More. These people are kind of well dressed, but they're not playing a character inside the hotel yet. And then once you're outside the maze, you hit a place called the Manderley Bar. This is an active bar. There's some people in some lovely costumes who are just having a good time. Quite often there's a singer and a band. You can get drinks. And this is just kind of a milling about space.
And of course, it's dark. And not only are the walls covered in red velvet cloth, so's the ceiling.
I love a good transitional space. And it's a bar. Everybody knows what to do at a bar, right? It's comfortable, but it's not the outside world.
And they have a couple of characters milling around that can talk to you, but they're not doing anything terribly interesting.
Right. It is neither the outside world nor the inside world is what's so fascinating about the Manderley. It's like this liminal space, which makes it a safe space during the show. Like they will say, if you need to tap out of this experience, come to the bar. And in fact, I have a friend of mine who was just like, nope, not my thing. And like halfway through, went to the bar for the rest of the night. But also serves too as a post-show social space. So since everybody's having these individual journeys, Punchdrunk realized that they wanted to have a space on site where people shared that, because in a way the show was not complete until they shared their stories. Anytime they've ever had a show where they didn't have a bar, they could feel that absence from the audience, the people just leaving with whatever it was that happened. And in so many ways, the denouement of Sleep No More is the conversation that you're having with the other people that you went with.
And so you can get a drink, you can buy some absinthe, you can get some water if you want. But before you know it, one of the gentlemen steps up to the mic and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, your attention, please. If any of our guests with an ace playing card, will please meet me by the elevator. Bring your ace over to the elevator." And that's them announcing that the first group is time to go in.
So once you are in the vestibule leading to the elevator, they will tell you some rules. And the speaking style is very soft, very purposeful. And they will tell you, you will now need to be putting on this mask. You can adjust it in the back, but you will need to wear this for the duration of the show. They actually do have masks for people who wear glasses that have some nice foam pieces on it to kind of keep it away from your face.
I did not know you could get those. I'm so mad. That was my other issue with it, was that I just could not see with my glasses and this mask, and it was just...
Why didn't they just give me one?
I think those are new.
Yeah, I think it's a Burnt City thing.
I think maybe they shipped over a batch of the Burnt City masks to New York when it closed.
To speak to the design of the thing, it's kind of like this off-white color, so it really shows up in the dark. Very easy to be able to identify in the dark hotel experience. That's a performer because they're not wearing a mask, or that's an audience member. They're not interesting. I need to go find somebody else. It has nice big eye holes. It also covers your mouth entirely to help out with the next rule, which is no speaking. So it really creates a full sense of anonymity. The no talking rule, I think, is actually really important for the audience, because that just allows you to know that you are just here as a voyeur. You're only here as a ghost. That is your role. Your role is to not participate and to grab clothes and be a part of the scene with Lady Macbeth and that sort of thing. At least that's what it implies. I do believe that they allow laughing and gasping, because I've certainly done my fair share of that over the years. They also say to keep a respectful distance from the performers. I've always felt the best rules are in the user interface that are just instinctive. If you're creating a rule to change behavior, it's never going to work. You have to change the design.
This kind of gets to the thing that I think bothered me the most in my visit, which was that I feel like when it comes to a lot of the stuff, the performers are not trained to take actions that stop or dissuade people from breaking these rules. That is something that could have been trained in. And I think that the bad behavior that I have seen, speaking to a lot of people, the audience has been trained, especially the avid visitors have been trained that they won't be stopped, that they can take liberties, and that they can assert themselves and they won't be punished for it.
Well, I think it's certainly not in Punchdrunk's DNA to interfere with whatever the audience is doing. And I don't think that we would make that choice, but that's what they do.
I just wish that whenever something really crazy important is happening, it would be on a slightly elevated area, because the few moments that I actually enjoyed myself were the actors, maybe they're climbing over these like suitcases or trunks and it's elevated. Everyone else is kind of forced to keep a distance, and also everybody can kind of see. I really enjoyed myself in that one scene where they're climbing over these things, and I was like, I wish important moments happened on a slightly elevated area.
Yeah, in the bigger spaces, they do manage to do that. But it's, again, like, I don't think that the show was designed for as many people as they have in there. It may have opened with a 450 capacity, and I think that's just because they thought that's how many would fit, not how many would make a great show.
Right. And like, this is an issue that we see across the immersive entertainment spectrum. You know, I mean, escape rooms putting 12 people in there because they can fit, not because they can all participate in the game.
Don't get us started.
Meow Wolf is always overcrowded. I don't care when you're going. And
oh my God, Disneyland, the 90-minute lines to go on a ride that used to be 20 minutes in my youth.
right. And I am concerned. Like, I understand valuing money, and I understand running a business. Like, certainly that is a value that Cameron and I have at Strangebird. That is something that we want to have happen. But at the same time, I don't think it's a good business decision to destroy your product by increasing the capacity. And
Right.
Sleep No More Shanghai is 300 people a night.
For China, I am floored that China has a lower capacity than the States. Like, what?
I think it's because they can afford to. I think the cost basis in Shanghai is lower than it is in New York, and so they feel less pressure to get the additional ticket sales.
My understanding is that the crowding of the performers in Shanghai is even more intense than it is in New York, which would just make sense with like cultural differences in terms of the way that crowds behave is very different in China. PG, yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. But I think that if they were to go and start to push more people into that, that would get even more intense than they want it to.
There's already so many people in China that their sense of personal space is a lot smaller bubble, almost non-existent bubble.
Well, let's enter the show briefly. So while during our digression, we've been standing in front of the elevator, our nicely dressed host ushers us into the elevator and starts taking it up and down. Haley, you've had the elevator in the last show. What do they say?
They say something very atmospheric and spooky. This journey is to be had by yourself and yourself alone. Do not expect to stay with others, which I think is a very important directive. And depending on who you're with, I think they stopped saying this, but they still do sometimes. They will end with, fortune favors the bold. The doors will open, one person gets off, and everybody moves to exit, and the doors shut again. The elevator attendant will give a little bit of laugh, and then open up the doors on another floor, and then let out most of the people, etc. And this plays out as a little bit of a gag.
And he'll drop people off on any of the 5 floors. There's 5 floors and a mezzanine in this building, and you can start on any one of them.
I didn't even know an elevator was an option. This is great.
The stairs are also, sometimes they do inductions via the stairs as well, where they say up or down is the choice. And the Mandalay is on the 2nd floor, so going down actually is an option. There's a bunch of content there that you can hit. So given a little bit of the lay of the land here, on the very bottom floor, if you go all the way down at the very start of the show, is where the ballroom is. That's where the ball takes place, as well as the banquet and some other big key scenes. It's a big empty room with a bunch of trees in it.
With a stage on it with a large banquet table.
There's also a small crypt off to the side in this where maybe you've seen Duncan's body being taken before.
If you go up the stairs from the ballroom, you get onto the mezzanine that has a balcony overlooking the whole ballroom. On the mezzanine also is King Duncan's apartments, and there's a tent.
On the 2nd floor, if you can find it again, is the Manderley Bar itself, but also the McKittrick Hotel lobby, where you'll often find the porter. In that lobby is some phone booths, as well as a small tea room that kind of looks like a restaurant.
If you go up to the 3rd floor, there's 2 different apartments. You have Macbeth's apartment and Macduff's apartment. And Macbeth's apartment is one single giant room with a bathtub on a stage in the middle and elevated furniture and a giant bed all along the walls where they can have dances and stuff. The Macduff's apartment is a warren of little tiny rooms. And between them is an outdoor, not really outdoor, but it's styled like outdoor, sort of a cemetery and ruined walls.
Up on the 4th floor is what they call the Gallow Green. This is like the town area. It has a whole bunch of different shops. Paisley Sweets, which is a candy shop. Bargarin's Taxidermy. Agnes's sister's apartment. There's a mortician's, even though there's a mortician character, there is that space. There's the McCrinnan and Reed Detective Agency, which is Malcolm's office. Fulton, the tailor, has his tailor shop. There's the Speakeasy, which is the nice rubberized floor with all the cardboard boxes surrounding it that has the pool table in it. And then there's also a space called the Burnt Manderley, or sometimes called the Ruined Manderley, which is a replica of the Manderley bar that you first entered into, except like it's burned, which in the story of Rebecca, the Manderley house actually burns down by the end of it. Spoilers. It is Spoilers Club. And, so it's like this ashen, rotting space that the god witch Hecate has taken over, and like chairs are ruined everywhere. And it's just a sad place of what it once was. But very exciting things happen here, most notably, of course, the rave.
And if you go up to the 5th floor, you have the King James Infirmary, which has 2 giant rooms full of bathtubs, some medical offices, an operating theater. There's a forest, which is also a maze with a hut in the back if you work your way all the way through it. And there's also a hallway with some audience bathrooms. Now, typically, it's actually pretty classic to find yourself let out on the 5th floor. I think they like to do that so that people will filter down. The 5th floor is usually the top of what you can get to. But there's not a whole lot that goes on the 5th floor. So if you find yourself there, just go down somewhere.
Yeah. Most of the action actually happens in the heart of the building, the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th floors. So like a good advice for a first timer is if you find yourself on the bottom or the top floor, you should move. There's just not going to be as much action there. There is a 6th floor. Dare we speak of it?
This is
Cameron
Spoilers Club.
Yep.
I don't know about the 6th floor.
Cameron and I have not seen it.
But we have 2 friends that have, so it does exist. We have secondhand knowledge. And it is a one-on-one only space. So a lot of one-on-ones will take place in a closet or something. But there is apparently one that will take you up to the 6th floor and wheel you around in a wheelchair, looking at the ceiling. They repeat this as often as they can. So if you're on the 5th floor and you see like a man with a briefcase by the elevator, go over there.
Or a woman, for that matter. Sometimes they are not running the 6th floor one-on-one. It kind of depends on staffing that day because it's a very easy performance part to cut. Nobody's going to be missing it because they don't interact with anybody but the audience. So it's kind of a little bit of a toss-up if they are even running that. But I believe they still do.
So we've maybe come off the elevator on the 5th floor and we've seen the bathtubs and realized that there's nothing going on down here. But we've been told by Haley's document that a good way to start is to head way on down to the lower levels of the building to the ballroom on the 1st floor, where there's a big event that happens right at the top of the show, and you'll be able to see over half the characters in the same place. Pick out someone who seems interesting to you or who you can recognize and follow them for the rest of the cycle. That's how we like to do it. So we're going to choose to follow Macbeth, and we're going to talk a little bit about his cycle so you get a kind of an idea what following this very major character around is. And of course, we're telling you this, and so we won't have to stand in line behind a tiny stairwell as 50 people follow this guy. But so this is kind of an idealized experience.
So you arrive on the bottom floor of the ball, and you notice that there is one character who is skulking about, leaning over the balcony of the mezzanine. And he doesn't seem to enjoy what he is looking at. So you find some stairs and you go up and next beside him. He never acknowledges that you are there. In fact, all the characters in Sleep No More will only ever make eye contact with you if they are mad, dead, or having a one-on-one. Otherwise, you don't exist. Those are the rules.
If you go up to this booth on the balcony, you can see a gentleman in a coat. All the guys are in pre-war suits, so they all look kind of the same. although you can recognize King Duncan and his son Malcolm, who will have some sort of different coat. They'll have a white coat or they'll have a crest on it. But the fellow overlooking the ball, sort of observing it, is Macbeth. And he's watching his wife hosting this ball. All the characters are dancing around, having a fun time, interacting with each other in various ways as their sort of plots require.
And he is growing increasingly jealous. He does not like what he sees. At this point, he knows what his wife wants him to do, and his wife is deliberately flirting with the king, and it's part of the plan, and he knows it, but he still doesn't like it. And the king gives the wife, his hostess, Lady Macbeth, a particular necklace, and that enrages him, and he flies from there to his bedroom on the 3rd floor.
Here he's reluctant to commit the murder because he's hosting the king at his house. Presumably the ball here is associated with him. But his wife, Lady M, comes up and convinces him through a series of dances to do Duncan's murder and achieve his destiny.
Then Macbeth skulks off, resigned to his fate, and he goes to the 2nd floor, where he finds Duncan in the apartments, who is the king. It's actually a tent scene to give that sense that he is a guest in the space or something like that, rather than in a normal bed. So he's lying on the floor, and Macbeth decides to smother him with a pillow. And he just covers the king in pillows until he just stops moving. And then Macbeth goes, having done the deed, to wash his hands in a basin nearby. It's just water. But when he pulls his hands out of the basin, his hands are completely covered in blood. So some sort of magic has happened to make his guilt manifest. So he did not kill Duncan in any way that would get his hands bloody. So he fully understands that there are forces at work here that are beyond him, and that freaks him out. And he goes from the death, and a bell rings throughout the entire hotel to signal the death of Duncan. Macbeth returns home.
And his hands are covered in blood. And I mentioned the bathtub in the middle of his apartment. And he starts washing himself in the bathtub. And Lady M comes in and helps him undress and get in the bathtub and wash all the blood off.
A little water cures us of this deed, I think, is the original quote. And that's like that line manifested in a visual, which is kind of how they're reinterpreting this text. There's a lovely scene where the two of them crawl into bed together, but there's no sexuality. In fact, they don't even really seem to be together, and they are not able to sleep. They are sitting there with their eyes wide open, staring and thinking about what they have done. And I really call this the sleep no more scene. They will never sleep again.
Macbeth gets up and heads up to the 4th floor, the Gallow Green floor. And he's up there standing in the street, and he hears kind of a rhythmic thumping coming from off in the distance. And he goes down this narrow, dark hallway covered in corrugated steel, running his hand along it, making a noise as his fingers hit the corrugations. And he enters the ruined Manderley, where Hecate has been summoning people, and there's already a bunch of witchly activity going on in there. And you start to get a sort of like techno backbeat going on. And the witches greet him at the table, and the audience is moved around. There's a lot of people here because this is a big confluence of characters. The audience is in a circle all around this table. And this is what we call the rave. It's the second prophecy of Macbeth, where he tells him that he'll be king, and Banquo's issue will be king.
And it starts strobing really heavily, like to the point where it's like snapshots. It is a scene that like you really just feel because of how strongly visual it is combined with the music. I often wonder how actors are able to control themselves through this, because like they're in one position and then suddenly they are like 3 feet somewhere else. They move so fast with the way that the strobing works. And because of the strobing, they're able to pull off a number of really exciting surprises. There's a lot of blood involved. Out of nowhere comes a bloody baby. They're taking off their clothes. They're licking the blood off of each other's bodies. It is really quite the orgy experience.
It's quite the blood orgy.
This is the infamous blood orgy. Okay, I
Yes.
never managed to make it there. It sounds amazing.
Oh, God. I'm so sorry.
I think this is the most technically impressive scene in the show. It is also, I think, arguably the most iconic scene of the show. It's, of all of the different scenes, there's sort of, I think, at the end of the day, there are people who visited Sleep No More and saw this scene and people who did not.
More's the pity. Like, they should funnel everybody through this. And they do some natural funneling by having so many characters present. You guys might not know this. Fulton the tailor is at the rave. If you're following, there's a lot of people that just come together to watch this from one perspective or another. And so that you should end up seeing it. But it's still not guaranteed.
It's not guaranteed. And they also, I know that they're very conscious of making sure that room is very well crowd controlled. It's probably the one place in the entire show that I felt most crowd controlled. They're definitely making sure that there aren't too many people in the room and that there aren't any people in that central space where these performers need to do all of this very quick movement in strobing darkness.
They're very careful about where you stand because they have places they need to be, and you don't want to be there because it's very dark. But like the strobe hits very slowly at first, these little vignettes that you'll see, and then it starts picking up, and eventually it's going really fast, really highly energetic.
The witches are screaming.
The witches are screaming. The character known as Boy Witch comes out naked with a goat head on, and everyone ends up covered in blood and laying about the table. And the lights come up, and they're all collapsed post-orgy. And the witches pull out from nowhere a tiny little tree and set it on the table in front of Macbeth.
And this represents the prophecy that Birnam Wood coming to Dunstane is going to be Macbeth's downfall. So the tree is actually a motif that you can trace throughout the entire show. That freaks him out, as you might imagine. So he leaves that scene and he's kind of staggering from that in the alley of the Gallow Green. And then he decides that he needs to take his own destiny into his hands. If part of the prophecy is Banquo's issue, well, let's go get rid of Banquo. So this is where he moves into the speakeasy. He interrupts a card game which is a game of kings that Malcolm, Macduff, and Banquo are playing. Macduff and Malcolm bolt out of there to go do another scene, and Banquo is left, who is Macbeth's good friend. And Macbeth makes to give him a jacket. Oh, you forgot your jacket. And Banquo goes for it. And Macbeth's, oh, no, never mind. So things start getting aggressive early. And it turns into a big murder fight scene where they're flying about.
Jumping up on the pool table. And of course, this is also a very crowd-controlled scene. All the audience is pushed against the wall up on a ledge to make sure you're not in the way of it.
This is another sensible scene to be aggressive with crowd control.
Yeah, this is the one I managed to see because I was in there watching the card game, which was ostensibly slightly boring, but there were 3 actors. So I was like, oh, I'm going to watch this. And then that's when Macbeth stumbles in with 50 people hot on his heels. And they didn't let any of them into the room. And this is the best moment ever.
My first show, I ended up watching that scene from behind the boxes because I came in with him, not already there. And not they can't jam everybody in there. So I was peering through the boxes. It was actually a pretty fun way to watch it.
It's a wonderful set piece. And these are very skilled, trained dancers, dance as murder or murder as dance or something like that. It's what they're capable of doing is just breathtaking. And to me, I think that is also something about Sleep No More that we need to acknowledge is if you love modern dance, you're gonna have some great scenes. And he ends up throwing Banquo over the bar where you then see him pick up a brick and smash it behind the bar. It's a nice thud, soft thud that really sounds like he's hitting flesh. And he does that over and over again. And he drops the brick. He exits the speakeasy and he meets his wife in the streets. She is at this point raving mad, as Lady Macbeth famously goes mad. And the two of them are fighting. They are just at the absolute height of madness together. And this is where they get into a lot of gibberish lines. But they have an appointment that they need to keep as King and Queen of Scotland. They must go to the banquet. So they go from the 4th floor all the way down to the 1st floor, which is technically 5 flights of stairs. And they're fighting the whole way through, and they arrive, both of them Macbeth completely bloody, and the crowd kind of parts as everybody at the banquet sees that they have finally arrived.
And so have a bunch of other characters, and they all take their place on a long, one-sided table up on a stage at the end of the ballroom, which is a huge space where everyone literally can stand and watch. So this is a big conglomeration scene. Lots of people will come down following characters to see the banquet. They take their seats, and the droning music starts, and there's a lot of haze in the air, of course. And they go through a very slow motion version of the banquet, where the witches have their concerns with various characters, and Macbeth is toasting people and his wife is serving. And then Banquo, completely bloody, walks up
from the head,
of course, walks up the stage, and he can be seen by McBee, which causes him a great amount of distress. All of this stuff happening in very slow motion. It's the durational activity sort of thing. But the music is very tense. And eventually, if this is not the last cycle, he'll run off, having had too much of the ghost. And we'll head across the ballroom to enter the lobby of the hotel.
In this room, he murders Lady Macduff, since one of the prophecies was also that Macduff was going to be his downfall. So he thinks the best way to do that is to murder his wife, ? Anyway, blame Shakespeare for that one. He murders a pregnant woman in, again, another stunning dance. Like, she's walking up the wall to try to get away from him, is the kind of dance that we're talking about.
Tearing the sheets down off the bookcases that they've been put up on.
Lady Macduff is dead and lifeless on the floor of the hotel lobby. Macbeth has done what he came there to do, and he goes downstairs to the ballroom again. But now the ballroom has been transformed into a forest. It's covered in pine trees. And he wanders through this forest madly, the prophecy now having been fulfilled.
And he sees, as he wanders through the forest back and forth, he finds a light that's shining horizontally in through the forest. And he wanders towards the light and resists it. He gets up on one of the giant columns in the ballroom and stands on his head as he faces his doom. And finally, he hops down, realizes he has to walk into the light. He pulls one person aside in a white mask and whispers something to them. We don't know what. We have suspicions, but we don't know what, because it wasn't one of us.
What are your suspicions?
Out, out, brief candle. Life is but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. Characters often whisper. It's a thing that can happen. It's not technically a one-on-one, but it is a way of being with the audience, and they will often use lines from the text. So I think that would be most fitting there, right? Usually that speech is a reflection of losing his wife, but I think I like the recontextualizing it of losing your own life in that moment.
He walks into this blinding light and just sort of disappears into it as the forest consumes him.
And then he just kind of gets up and he goes and meets Banquo, and they embrace each other. They're good friends. Macbeth is kind of bloody. Banquo is kind of bloody. And they're like, oh man, that battle was really tough, wasn't it? And they go into the luggage room of the hotel lobby where they change clothes, wash all the blood off from the previous cycle, but now it's been recontextualized. This is what we call the moment of reset. So this is the actual start of the narrative in a linear fashion, even though the cycle didn't exactly start there when you first entered. It's very unlikely that you're entering upon the moment that it starts in the narrative fashion, in the linear fashion. I actually think it's really fun to see the magic of reset, like how it is that a character just like dusts off and then does it again. There's a story that Hecate cursed everybody in this hotel to just repeat the events of these days over and over again as eternal punishment.
I like that. Okay, Haley, I will say I now want to go back and see it, so I feel like you have accomplished one goal here.
I mean, it's okay. I still love people and respect people who don't like Sleep No More. It is a very deeply subjective experience. But there is obviously something in it that is very powerful for me.
It's not that I didn't like it. I just didn't like the crowds, and I didn't like not seeing or understanding what happened. And so now that I feel like I have a deeper understanding of what happens, it's easier for me to go in and be satisfied on that. And then I can just enjoy the experience, right?
Yeah. Punchdrunk is not holding your hand through this experience. And we're kind of used to writers doing that for us. And I get that. That is like what we expect, right? Is that writers are going to take care of us. The experience is going to take care of us. And they're not doing that at all. For better or for worse. And I think it does a little bit of both.
I like that. If I didn't have to fight through crowds, I would go back 4 or 5 times to see everything and try to put those threads together myself.
And I think that this is where what I'll say is I'm someone who loves the choose your own adventure, take what you choose to take out of an experience model of Sleep No More. I feel very strongly that the show needed to evolve with the audience, and it didn't. I feel very strongly that, like, when we start to talk about the one-on-ones later on, it's a function of who's standing where at exactly the right time. That is very much the way that I've observed it.
Haley's shaking her head no.
It's not true. It's not true.
It frequently is. Like, the last person to do a thing is the person who gets a thing. You're shaking your head no, but like, I've watched it, and I've also very much watched them continue to choose really aggressive, really poor audience members.
Really aggressive small women that make their way to the front, and the big guys in the back never get picked.
Shut up, PG.
I've watched just a lot of really bad behavior get rewarded, and I very firmly believe that in rewarding that, they created a positive feedback loop, that is the way to engage with it, and that it is totally fine for individual members of an audience to go and dramatically degrade the experience for large numbers of people so that they can go and check a box and have an experience. And I think that's where, for me, this is a problem that regularly pulls me out of this experience. Makes me very conscious of myself and how I'm treating other people, makes me very conscious of other people and how they're treating me, and makes me not at all conscious of the show. And it makes it very difficult to engage with all of the beautiful, wonderful things that you have just been describing for the last hour.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Sleep No More has not evolved. Punchdrunk is very disciplined, almost to a fault, in replicating the performance. They're very good at making sure it's exactly what it is, no matter who's playing it, no matter when it is. Like, Sleep No More today is, for better and for worse, the exact same Sleep No More as 2009. And in 2009...
No, 2011.
2011. Well, 2009, it's almost the same as Boston, but sure.
It
sure,
got
2011.
changed, but okay, sorry. Sorry, quibbling.
But it is the same show as when it launched, and the audience is not the same.
I want to bring this in for a landing. This is going to be the end of part 1, and then we have so much more to discuss in part 2. I have this love-hate relationship with this show because I think so much of what they did is so remarkable and so beautiful, and I feel like at the same time they have taken an extreme angle on how they engage and choose to engage with their audience that is most rewarding to people who are either the absolute most tolerant of bad behavior or really eager to perpetuate bad behavior. And I think that, for me, is what really shattered my experience the last time. This show highlights so many things that I want in an experience and so many things I don't want in an experience.
Well, I mean, like I said in the Summers episode, I don't even like to play public escape rooms, let alone be in a crowd with 400 people. But I mean, you guys went recently. Did you feel any of what we were feeling, or is it that you had been there so many times you didn't really notice the crowding as much?
I will say that, David, what you were expressing, I have not seen. So it's not rampant. I actually kind of want to ask the question, did you guys go on a Saturday night?
No, we went on like
Wednesday.
a Wednesday.
Okay. All right. I mean, it's random. Cameron had a bad show Sunday night. I think it was like January 21st when we went. And I had a great show. Then we went Monday night, and I had crowds.
You guys went 2 nights in a row.
Oh, yeah.
I would recommend it. If anyone goes to Sleep No More, like for the first time, I would plan on doing 2.
The first time, you're like, where am I? How does this function? What is going on? And then you see one thing, like the murder of Banquo, and you're like, oh, is that what's going on here? And then the second time, you have a lay of the land, you have some grounding in what these characters look like and how the show is functioning, so that you can go in very deliberately, like maybe with a bit of an agenda, or at least just with a greater sense of control and purpose in your second time, so that you can get a little bit more of what you wanted out of a show. So usually your first show or your second show ends up being people's favorites, which is certainly true for us.
We recently took most of our cast of Strange Bird to see Sleep No More.
16 people.
Probably we're casting for people who are going to enjoy it, but most of them really wanted to go back a second time. There's so much content in there. I mean, there's 22 characters with an hour-long loop, so depending on how you count it, like 12 to 22, 24 hours of content in there, and you only get 3. So there's reasons to want to go back a second time.
Yeah. But I think what is the audience behavior that night around the characters that you are following is a crapshoot. I don't think the problems are rampant. Like, I don't think it's a guaranteed. Crowding is different than bad behavior. Those are 2 different categories of things. And the crowds themselves, it can vary per character. The bad behavior, it's just totally random. It takes just very little to spoil somebody in that way.
I did find a lot of people who, like Haley and I, know how to follow the characters, how to be the first behind them, or at least very close. But that's about as much as I saw that was competitive.
And honestly, this is the risk. This is the risk of immersive entertainment. You make the audience active. You give them something to do. Some people are going to behave differently than others. But I agree that you need to have your staff prepared to handle that.
I always come back to the episode that we recorded with Johanna Koljonen. Everything is a designable surface, and if the audience isn't engaging the way that you want them to, it is your job as the designer to adjust the way that you have designed in order to change that behavior. The show can't be eternal. Wonderful as so many pieces of it are, I think that it's kind of run its course.
Yeah, I mean, nothing runs forever. Even Phantom of the Opera closed eventually. It's an amazingly long run for a wild experimental show like it is. Sleep No More, if you're to believe Punchdrunk, and I've heard this from several places, was intended to be a 6-week run. Like, that was kind of their minimum mission, was a fairly short-lived installation. And having held on for over a decade like it has is pretty darn impressive.
I heard Felix talk at Immersive Homecoming about the conception of Sleep No More, and he says that he came up with this like practically overnight for a competition or something like that. He submitted it in some type of competition, and the basic idea of it just kind of came to him, and that's what they submitted. I don't remember if he said they won or not.
He did. His application was a suitcase. It wasn't like when they were expecting papers, he delivered a suitcase, and you had to open up the suitcase and find all the disparate elements to understand what this person was pitching. So again, like experiential, thinking about the audience rather than delivering content.
But making you do the work.
Yeah.
Like, it's up to you to figure it out.
And that's very much a hallmark. If you enjoyed this episode of the Sleep No More's Spoilers Club, make sure to join our Patreon to get access to part 2 of this 2-part series. Now, part 2 of the Sleep No More series focuses more on the solo moments and character interactions. We'll also explore the finale as well as the high and low points of the production. These Sleep No More episodes can be used as both a guide before you go, as well as a recap and discussion if you've already seen the show.
Our patrons get so much by backing us at patreon.com/roomescapeartist. Those supporters at the $15 level and up get the Spoilers Club. They also get tons of additional bonus and early access content, early access to tickets to our events. And that bonus show, we put out a lot of them, and we put a lot of love into them as well. We have really fun conversations. We spoil great games. And there's just a lot going on in our Patreon community. We hope that you join us.
And as always, if you have enjoyed this content, we would really appreciate a 5-star rating and review. Thank you so much for listening.